when you expose yourself to something that's unknown, the extroversion and openness can drive you forward as a function of curiosity and engagement. But the uncertainty is also the uncertainty you pay a price for physiologically, because when you face something uncertain, your body, like when you're angry, your body has to prepare for anything, and that's expensive and physiologically demanding. And open people, they flip things upside down all the time, and that's dangerous. Like, it isn't like it's not necessary, don't get me wrong. It's necessary. This chapter I made allusion to, I said, don't casually criticize social institutions or creative achievement. I picked those phrases very carefully. We need social institutions, but they become corrupt. And so we need creative revolution, but it can get out of hand. And so there's this constant war between the strictures of tradition and the transformation of creativity. And you can't say who's right. You can just talk it out. Yeah. But what, the psilocybin, you take one dose and have a mystical experience, and you move from 50th percentile openness to 85th percentile with one dose. It's a major neurological rewiring. It's stunning. It's stunning. And you could say, well, I'm sure there are things about that are good. But Jung said, beware of unearned wisdom.
It's a good quote.
It is a good quote. Jung really puzzles me, because it's never clear to me how he knew the things he knew. And that's one really good example of that.
So on the openness, just to explore this a bit further, it also seems, again, I'm not a clinician, but speaking just as someone at least involved on some level with the science,
and as an open person.
I try. Yeah.
Oh no, there's no doubt about it. Given what you do, you're entrepreneurial and you're interested in ideas. Like your cardinal personality trait undoubtedly is openness. And if you can manage it, it's a great trait.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you have disqualifying criteria for becoming a subject in these psilocybin studies, schizophrenia being one of them, or a family history of schizophrenia, which seems to overlap with some of what you were saying earlier, right? There are risk factors. If you are sort of swimming closer to the bank of the river that is chaos.
Yeah, if you're schizophrenic, you should stay away from amphetamines. It's pretty obvious that the whatever the hallucinogens do isn't the same as schizophrenia.
It's not,
people think that, but you can induce paranoid schizophrenia in normal people by overdosing them on amphetamines.
Yeah. So not.
Still, it might not be a good idea if you have a family history to mess around.
Yeah, it seems to possibly accelerate the onset. Not that they're the same thing, although these drugs used to be referred to as psychomimetics, but that's since been somewhat disproven in terms of neurological correlates, just looking at fMRI scans and so on. Now, on the other hand, you have acute anxiety, in some cases chronic, but acute anxiety in, say, terminal cancer patients, which Hopkins has also, is a population Hopkins has worked with.
Yeah.
And in those cases, the shift to openness can be life-changingly positive.
Well, I don't know if it's the shift to openness exactly, or if it's the religious aspect of the experience.
True.
Yeah.
True. Absolutely. I mean, if you have ego dissolution, that can do something for fear of death.
Oh yeah, I also think that's phenomenal research. It's unbelievably interesting.
You start getting real careful about what you think about. You don't allow your thoughts to be on anything that you don't want, or that you wouldn't want to have manifest or show up for you in your life. Emerson said, the ancestor to every action is a thought. And you can look at every spiritual tradition, whether it's Eastern or Western, whether it's ancient or modern, whether it's civilized, quote, or uncivilized, quote, whether it's tribal. And there is, in all of these persuasions, this idea that inside each and every one of us, in a place that is not material, in a place that has no dimensions, in a place that has no boundaries, that in each and every one of us, we have this power and we have this intelligence, and you can never see it. I've often said that when you die, if you're going to die and 5 minutes before you're ready to leave, they weigh your body, and let's say it weighs, oh, let's pick a good number, 150 pounds, all right? And then life leaves your body, and they weigh your body instantly after you're dead, and it still weighs 150 pounds. So that your body weighs the same, alive or dead, before it begins to deteriorate. And if that's the case, then your life, this thing that leaves your body and your body still weighs the same, is weightless. Your life is weightless. You can't put a dimension on it. You can't put a measure on it. Who you are is that life. And that life is not in the dimension of material. It's like if I want to wiggle my finger, I just have to have a thought. And the thought says, I think I'm going to wiggle my finger. And then I do this, and you say, well, that's really no big deal. But it really is a big deal. Because there's something invisible in here that says, I'm going to wiggle my finger. I've never seen that. I've never been able to, you can put that under an X-ray, you can try to measure that and find out what it is in there that allows you to say, I'm going to wiggle my finger, and you can never find it. It's not in this world, if you will. So I can do all the scientific studies, and what I can do when I do these scientific studies is I can find the command center inside of me. And I can go to the brain and I can point to a specific point, and scientists can do this and say, there's the command center, which allows you to have a thought, I think I'm going to wiggle my finger. But there's no computer and there's no scientists and there's no technology that can ever allow us to go inside and say, there's the commander in the command center. Can't find it. And that commander in the command center, that weightlessness, is the part of us that we just don't pay enough attention to. And what I'd like to suggest here this evening is that once you start becoming aware of the power of thought, and if you look around, just look around you at everything that you see, it all began with a thought. We become what we think about. And that is probably one of the most important principles in learning to manifest. But in my mind, as I think about this idea of getting what you really want and being able to attract it into your life, what we have to look at is basically the obstacles that we have conditioned ourselves. And you notice I say that we have conditioned ourselves, because I have never believed that we need to be putting the responsibility on someone else. If you're conditioned, it's because you have allowed yourself to become that. And if we've conditioned ourselves to believe certain kinds of things, and one of the things that we kind of believe and hang on to and live with is this whole idea that all of the things that happened to me in my past are what are keeping me from doing what I'd like to do today. So we hang on to these things and we fill ourselves with blame. We say, I'm the middle child. I'm the youngest child. I'm the oldest child. I'm an only child. Any one of those is a great excuse. You know, if you're the youngest child, you can say, well, you know, how could I be making decisions for myself and be a fully functioning person today when I always had somebody else telling me what to do my whole life? How could I think for myself? If you're the oldest child, you can simply say to yourself, well, how could I be expected to think for myself? I always had to think for somebody else. I was always doing it for somebody else. And that leaves the middle child, you know, the classic identity crisis. Oh, poor me. My mother didn't even know my name. She was always calling me by this one's name or that one's name. So I don't know where I fit in. So that takes care of everybody except the only child. And of course, the only child, well, your parents looked at you and said, we won't be doing that again. Huh? You have to live with that, I don't. Huh? So everybody, with their birth order, or with their mother liked their sister better, or that we had enough, or we didn't have enough, or we had too much, or we lived in the north, we lived in the south, I'm too tall, I'm too short, I've got too much hair, I don't have enough hair, it's falling out, it's not falling out, whatever it is, we all have these excuses. And I call all of these things that we hang on to and use to keep ourselves from reaching these higher places in our lives, the wake. I call it the wake.